All right, so this right here is a review of cellular respiration and photosynthesis from middle school. As far as what the learning objectives, so pieces of information that you guys are going to be required to understand from this video, you should be able to list the products and reactants for photosynthesis and cellular respiration. You should also be able to name the location of where each of these reactions occur in eukaryotes. And the last thing you should be able to do is explain how these processes are interrelated. Now, although this is a review from middle school, we do it because once we move into ecology and even when we sort of reflect back on chemistry, one of the big ideas in biology that you need to know is how energy is going to transform. So how it's going to move between the living and the non-living world and where these transformations happen. So we review from middle school, make sure we're all on the same page so that when we sort of elaborate on these ideas in ecology, we can make sure we're all able to sort of speak the same language. So quick warm up. All living things, we need the ability to classify. So there's a huge diversity of living things on this planet. And in order to classify, we have to have terms to describe different types of organisms. One of the ways that we can differentiate between living things is based on how they obtain energy. So there are two terms we learned about in middle school to describe organisms based on how they obtain energy. So see if you can remember what they are. Good, so hopefully you were able to remember that autotroph and heterotroph, those are our two terms to describe how things obtain energy. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about what those are. Quick clarification statement before we continue on. Our discussion today on photosynthesis and cellular respiration is going to focus on eukaryotic organisms. So organisms that have a nucleus, have membrane-bound organelles. So if you look down at the pictures that I have for you guys down at the bottom, on the left-hand side, turtles, toucans, goats, these are all animals, but your animals, plants, protists, and fungi. So all your eukaryotes are really going to follow the rules of photosynthesis and cellular respiration that we're going to talk about today. You do have heterotrophic and autotrophic prokaryotes. So those would be organisms that are pictured down at the right-hand side bottom of the screen. However, because bacteria don't have membranous-bound organelles, so they don't have chloroplasts and they don't have mitochondria, how they're going to perform cellular respiration and photosynthesis is different. So we're going to do a unit on bacteria and viruses later on in the year. So we're going to kind of sort of ignore prokaryotes for now with the understanding that we'll come back later and talk about what they do. So all the energy on Earth, here this is 2, 3, and 4 in your notes, all of the energy on Earth originates from the sun. So anything you eat was originally energy from the sun that was then captured and turned into organic molecules by an autotroph. Autotrophs are organisms. Auto itself means self. Here we go. So automatic means able to do it by itself. So autotrophs are self-feeders, and they're capable of capturing energy from the sun and storing it in organic molecules on their own. And the process they use to do this is called photosynthesis. So we're talking about organisms converting sunlight into stored molecules. That's photosynthesis that they use to do that. The term itself, oh, my dog's chewing the story. The term itself, photo means light, and synthesis means to make. So photosynthesis means the process of making something from light. So right here, quick review. So vocabulary, we learned the terms product and reactants at the beginning of the year when we did chemistry. And I told you that when we did cellular respiration and photosynthesis, we were going to use these terms again. So let's practice and see if we remember. So see if you can label what substances should be on the products. So what substances are your products? Good, so hopefully you're able to get that carbon dioxide, CO2, and water are your products here in this example. So products are what are produced or made, so they're going to be on the right side. Your reactants, that's going to be what goes in. So in this case, CH4 is methane, O2 is oxygen. Those are your reactants in this example. So now we're going to need to be able to use these terms, product and reactants, in terms of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. So when you do these, I'm going to ask you questions like, what are the products of photosynthesis? So you have to know the term products. I'm asking you what's being made during photosynthesis. So here, this is your question. So if you take a look, this right here shows you the reaction of photosynthesis. So if we look at our reactants, we have two different ways that we can describe this equation. One is using molecular formulas, and one is using the terms themselves. So if you look at your reactants, you have carbon dioxide, or CO2, and water, H2O, going in. You also notice that on top of the yield sign, or the arrow in the center, you have light. Now, sunlight is also a reactant. A lot of times energy is written on top or underneath the yield sign. However, realize that it is still a reactant, something that has to go in. We notice our products of photosynthesis. This is going to be sugar. Now, the sugar specifically that's being made is glucose. And glucose, the formula for that is C6H12O6. In addition to making glucose, photosynthesis is also going to produce oxygen, which is O2. And this reaction, photosynthesis in eukaryotes, is going to take place in the chloroplast. That's where it takes place. Skip this for now. All right. So the other type of organisms that we have are your heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are consumers. They have to obtain their energy by taking in organic compounds. Now, we like the term eat because we think of ourselves as eating, but realize that something like an amoeba, a single-celled organism, that's also going to be a heterotroph. It's going to take in organic compounds, but it's not like it has a mouth and it's going to chew up its organic compounds. So consumers, essentially think of them as they can't make their own organic compounds, so they have to take them in from outside. Quick misconception that I want to clear up before we keep going. Autotroph and heterotroph is a term that describes how organisms obtain their energy, so how they get the energy. Once they have that energy, so once they have that glucose, it does not matter if they are autotrophs or heterotrophs anymore. They are going to use the exact same chemical process to break down glucose to make energy inside their cells. So see if you can remember what chemical reaction is going to convert stored chemical energy into usable ATP in your cells. Good, so hopefully we're able to remember that that's cellular respiration. So cellular respiration is going to convert chemical energy from glucose into usable energy in the form of ATP. So again, it asks you, number 10, what molecule do organisms break down inside their cells for energy? That's glucose. That's your glucose that's breaking down. And let's see if you guys remember this from middle school. Where does this reaction occur? So that, again, is going to be your mitochondria. So again, we love that term. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. However, what it means when we call it the powerhouse is that it's breaking down glucose to form ATP for the cell to be able to run its cellular processes. And here's your reaction for cellular respiration. So if you take a look, we have glucose and oxygen as our reactants. Again, we have two different ways to describe it. One is the molecular formula, like C6H12O6. The other is going to be the term itself. You should know both. So you should be able to recognize the formulas for these molecules. You also should be able to recognize them based on their wording. Our products, so what's being made, we have carbon dioxide or CO2, water, and ATP. Now, cellular respiration, again, goes on in every single organism, even plants. So one of my favorite questions that I love to ask is, do plants produce carbon dioxide during cellular respiration? And people love to say no, because we all think of plants as being oxygen producers. However, realize that they still do cellular respiration. So yes, plants do produce carbon dioxide. It's just that they use that carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis. Now, if we talk about humans for a second, the ATP that's made during cellular respiration is a product. That is what the mitochondria is trying to make. That's going to power your cellular processes. Carbon dioxide and water are essentially waste, so they're byproducts. And the way that humans are going to get rid of this, so you are going to take in your oxygen that you need through your lungs. You're also going to use your lungs to get rid of that waste, that carbon dioxide. Water. Water, again, is going to be absorbed into the bloodstream, and we have special organs that act as filters to pull out excess water. See if you can remember what organ is that that's going to pull out excess water from our blood. Good, so quick review. Hopefully we're able to remember that kidneys are going to pull out excess water, and so in this case, when you make these extra waters during cellular respiration, kidneys will eventually filter out any excess water. They'll send that excess water down to the bladder where it's ultimately excreted. So the last thing, if we take a look at the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis, what we notice is that it's essentially a cycle, meaning that there's no starting place here, but if we start looking at our chloroplast on the top, we notice that the product of photosynthesis is going to be glucose and oxygen. That's also the reactant of our cellular respiration. We notice that the product of cellular respiration, carbon dioxide and water, is going to be the reactant of photosynthesis. So the last thing you need to do in your notes is, if you take a look down here, give me a couple reasons to explain why. So photosynthesis is going to rely on carbon dioxide during cellular respiration, and then cellular respiration is going to rely on the glucose and oxygen produced during photosynthesis. So you should have your complete set of notes right now. Go back if you do not and read.